After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. The rules that represent the very values many WNBA players and coaches have publicly advocated for.
We have to have some kind of structure in society, and unfortunately, this is going to be a perfect measuring stick for if it is actually fair for people to have the same amount of leeway to do the same thing. There's so many other things that we can be discussing. For us to be discussing this just tells me how crazy of a time that we're living in.
After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in May 2027. I am definitely not here to mock, make fun of, or disrespect any community or personal choices. I am simply asking that the current rules be applied equally to everyone. The rules that represent the very values many WNBA players and coaches have publicly advocated for. My team and I are prepared to ensure these guidelines are applied equally, consistently, and without exception. And I look forward to the WNBA honoring its stated principles. See you at training camp.
Oh boy. So unless you've been living under a rock, you haven't seen that Enes Kanter declared for the WNBA draft. Honestly, when I first saw it, I thought, okay, I thought he was trolling. But then when I listened to it at depth, I said, okay, I see what he's doing. And by the way, just since then, two other players, I just saw an article once I came out on social media, and this is a Sunday, that Michael Beasley, by far, if Michael Beasley goes into the WNBA, he will be averaging 60 points, 70 points, probably at a half. For those of you who don't know who Michael Beasley is, you need to go check out Michael Beasley back in high school, college, and even in the pros. Like, that man is a monster. But this is one of the dumbest things that I think we've allowed to happen. And unfortunately, just because we don't want to identify something, like I don't think most people honestly have an issue with the whole trans thing. And I never thought about this, didn't care for it. You know, if someone wants to think that they're a woman, whatever. They want to think they're a man, whatever. It's their life, you know? I guess the ultimate problem is when you're allowed to, not everyone's given the same rights to be able to decide what they feel or think that they are. I mean, I totally understand, and I sympathize with individuals that are trans for, the things that might be going on within, their minds or whatever, right? I sympathize with because I'm sure it is a struggle trying to explain to people what you feel that you are. But the problem with that is having to make the rest of the world, I believe, bend to confine to what you want. And I think that's the ultimate problem. We have to have some kind of structure in society, and unfortunately, this is going to be a perfect measuring stick for if it is actually fair for people to have the same amount of leeway to do the same thing. What's the difference if he's just said that he literally identifies, or he'll be eligible because he identifies, and we'll go into the actual CBA for the WNBA and see if he does meet the requirements based off of what they've collectively bargained with the players, right? But the problem is, if you let another individual who is trans say that they want to play in the WNBA because they identify as a woman, then what stops Enes Kanter from doing the same? And I think that that's what, if you're an individual who wants to go to bat for the trans community, and I get that you might think or feel as if this is a trolling, but you have to ask yourself, whatever that differentiating factor is that says, okay, this person can do it, but not this guy, you have to be able to articulate that. And they have to, and I guess the WNBA, which now they're having an emergency meeting to be able to decide that. Because at the end of the day, right, this can actually have legal ramifications. If they don't allow Enes Kanter to be able to play, and Michael Beasley and whoever else, they can actually have a legal suit on their hands, right? Because in their current collective bargaining agreement, they don't actually spell out what the requirements are to be eligible to be considered a woman, right? So if they don't want this to keep happening, because this will be easy money for these guys, this should honestly be an easy case if it actually goes to court. At least I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert in the legal side, but it kind of makes sense if you just look at what their collective bargaining agreement is. So of course, I did a little deep dive in our ChatGPT friend, and basically what I found is, I'll read you guys basically what it kind of articulated about the CBA and why Kanter and them might have a little wiggle room room, at least to be able to force the WNBA to pick and to set guidelines as to what a eligible woman would be. So it says the controversy that is the WNBA CBA says only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. But publicly, right, we have this whole argument that I think is rooted in a lot of stupidity from the jump, because to me it doesn't really make sense, right? I don't think, like I said earlier, I don't think anyone really cares what you want to identify as yourself. No one cares. Knock yourself out. At least I'm sure there's some people that care. There's some losers out there that worry about what other people want to identify themselves as. But the problem is when you make the rest of everybody have to choose that. That to me, I always say this. I looked at it from the standpoint of, like I said, I sympathize with people, but if I wanted to identify as a child, I don't know if society is going to be okay with that, right? So once again, though I totally understand where these guys are coming from, I really do. I feel, or guys and girls, depending on where the spectrum that they are, or whatever they choose to say they identify as. But the problem is, why do the rest of us have to change what we know to be quote unquote normal to confine to just you? We cannot make rules for the small amount of people and then have the mass have to obey those rules. That to me doesn't seem fair, just doesn't seem rational. I shouldn't say it's not even fair, it just doesn't seem rational, right? So let's continue on. So it says Kanter has recently said that he intends to enter the 2027 draft. By the way, he would unequivocally go, Beasley would go number 1. He'd probably go number 2. The other guy, White, I think he played from Houston for a while. I don't remember him being that good. But I really want to tell you guys, the truth of the matter is, if they allowed this to happen, this would be, you would see it would be so painful for so many young women that actually want to play the sport. Now, forget what political side you on. Honestly, I think anyone can see the fact that this doesn't hurt anybody else but the individuals who've worked hard and just at the end of the day just cannot beat men. Like, basketball is one of those sports where women can be really good at it, but unfortunately, if Enes Kanter played in the WNBA, he would probably be one of the best. If he was the only one, he'd probably be the best player there, unequivocally. He's about 6'10", 6'11". This is a good basketball player. He might average 40 to 50 points a game. So I don't think it's fair for those individuals to have the women to have to play against guys like this. If you don't think this is fair, then I don't think any guy should be able to utilize this skill. Just like I would say, if it was a sport in which you had to consider being small and, let's say, tumbling, for an example. Well, I don't even know if men do tumbling as a sport, but anything where you have to go through small spaces and women and men both play. I don't think it would be fair for if women got the ability to take on that role and play in the men's side, because they would probably be able to benefit because they had smaller hands or smaller whatever, like to be able to fit in those spaces. Now, that's probably not a great idea, because I can't think off the top of my head which sport women would be able to dominate men in general, of course. Please, in the comments, do not tell me about the one-off person. Yes, I know there are women out there that can beat some men in basketball, tennis, whatever, of course, but I'm talking professional to professionals. I think that's kind of a common sense thing. It shouldn't really be that much of an issue. Now, I get it. We've made it such a publicized issue and people have such hard stance on it. There's a lot of things that people do wrong on party sides, and honestly, but this one to me is one of the no-brainers. I honestly think Democrats have a great opportunity to win a lot of seats in the upcoming election. This is not a hill that they need to die on. Let's just be honest. This is not the hill that Democrats need to die on. They need to let this one common sense and just say, sure, whatever the WNBA agrees to, that's what we'll do. Whatever they agree to, fine. But keep in mind, if you're gonna allow some, unless you change what your CBA says, you're gonna have an issue with people being able to do what Enes Kanter says. So let's continue on. Let's continue and let's read what our chat assistant was telling us, okay? So it says, Enes was assigned male at birth. Simply to declare himself a female would not establish that he meets the eligibility requirement, but there is no evidence that Enes has undergone the medical, so basically it's saying, yeah, there's no evidence that he's undergone any medical transformation / hormone requirements that would historically been a part of the transgender athlete policy in women's sports. The WNBA has never had a player who transitioned from male to female after being assigned male at birth competing. Okay, so that's the thing, right? For right now, the WNBA doesn't have this problem, which to me is fine. They should never have this problem. But the question becomes, if they start allowing trans, and if that's what they choose to, then that's fine. But just understand that you then have to set a rule as to what that is. Because if you don't set a rule, one, you face potential for legal ramifications, but two, you face dumb shit like this, where guys, Kanter, are coming out and saying, hey, I want to play in the league. I want to, so I'm sure that the things that they can do, set hormone levels and things like that, but then they just have to hold that through, because they would also, unless they superseded it with, unless you're born a female from birth, you automatically don't have to check those hormone levels. But then if you are transitioning, then we would have to check your hormone levels and things like that. It's a complicated story, not the best thing for us to really be arguing or discussing in 2026. We have so many other things, the economy's in shambles. We have healthcare, people losing their jobs, AI's taking people's jobs. There's so many other things that we can be discussing. For us to be discussing this just tells me how crazy of a time that we're living in. Man, 2026, the year's not even on the Q4, and we're already dealing with enough dumb shit. So do you believe that if they allow trans athletes to play in the WNBA, should Enes Kanter have an option to be able to play in the NBA? Should they have a hormone therapy requirement? Like, you have to be on hormone therapy for this amount of time and all of that. And if so, where do you think that would ultimately leave women's sports? Will that be something that they ultimately benefit from? Or is that something that damages the sport in the long run? Let me know what you guys think in the comment. I'm gonna see you guys in the next video.